I ended up getting an Awakened Bramble Bow in Realm of the Mad God, and it's a pretty fun weapon. So we have armor piercing 170% rate of fire. So my first thought was, let's go Wave Crest Bard and try to build an army of parrots. But that 5% is still kind of low, so we get like 2 parrots out sometimes. I've seen 3 very rarely, and they don't really last that long, even with a Faded Heart Scarab, because I was thinking, let's get as much dex as possible, and because of the armor piercing, the minus attack doesn't really matter too much, so that seems like a really cool build. However, with the other enchants, it doesn't really synergize with the Faded Heart Scarab, because you might be thinking, if I get a dexterity trade-off, like relative dexterity, or dexterity is some kind of other stat, because we have the 25%, it's going to go crazy, right? It actually doesn't, because this applies after. So this doesn't count as bonus dexterity for your bonus dexterity calculations. So yeah, you can't like super duper cheese it, but we have 98 dex. So that's pretty neat. I've also had some other ideas like going Mayhem Bard, so we can just get like as much dex and attack and offensive stuff as possible, and the Chief's Warhorn is pretty cool. The problem is that the range for it is pretty small, so unless you are just going to like sit down, hunker down, and slam some attacks, then it doesn't really do you much good, but being able to just like proc a Berserk whenever you want, and then get a lot of stats as well, where, oh, now we're at 87 dex, 63 attack. That feels pretty nice on the offenses, so we can find an interesting combination of stats. Also, the idea is, okay, you drop this banner down, then you switch on over to your Wave Crest Concertina, and maybe you end up with a ton of parrots. But no, this doesn't give you any more parrots, it seems. And then overall, I like running the Magic Protective Matrix because this is a very rare and valuable item, and I don't want to lose it stupidly. So if I use this kind of, like, the thing is, even though it's a long-range bow, and you can just kind of, like, be a bard, sit back, and leech if you want to, if you want to do, like, big damage, you gotta be pretty close up to the range, and then you just kind of shred things, but that can be really dangerous, so Magic Protective Matrix. Now, when it comes to playing Realm of the Mad God, I go off of vibes more than anything else. How does this build feel in practice instead of, oh, this is meta, this is the highest DPS, this is the most optimal thing? That's because there's just so many different variables to the game. That range, keeping yourself safe when there's a lot of damage and a lot of lethal threat out there. The content you want to clear, the content you're most comfortable with. That, yeah, if I want to clear an Exaltation dungeon, don't need to bring my Awakened Divine thing. I just need to stack health and just kind of sit back and make sure I tag a little bit of damage. I also don't join sweaty Discord groups or try to like care about requirements and stuff. I just play the game. So if the build feels better or more effective to me, then I'm just going to consider that like really good instead of, oh, but it's, you know, compared to tier 13 or tier 14, this is whatever. But it's also hard to compare this to something like a Knight, where I have a crazy amount of single-target, low-range damage, instead of just kind of shredding things for farming at mid-range. Actually, cool, I just got a tier 10 bow drop, so we have something to directly compare to, because the nice thing about this is that it just puts a crazy amount of projectiles out there, and it eventually does shred some enemies. So what does the tier 10 look like, where, yeah, we can hit them. It feels noticeably slower, it does have a smaller range, you do have to be a bit more accurate, maybe get a bit closer range to actually get the damage, but also the lingering projectiles means you can kind of move around a bit more or fall back, and it's still going to be able to take out the enemies, even if you're just hitting a couple shots at the end. So yeah, at the very least, the Awakened Bramble Bow beats a tier 10 bow, and it's probably going to feel about the same as like a tier 13, but then I wonder like, oh, but what if you get an attack speed or damage trade-off tier 10 or tier 13 bow? Is that just always going to be better, or is just the amount of projectiles and the armor shred? Because for certain bosses, it can be kind of difficult to get optimal DPS onto them, and that's why we run the Protective Matrix. I want to get out of here so I can, so I can not die. I just want to like check the loot, do some other things. We got a legendary robe. Maybe there's something decent there. I feel like with all these Awakened enchantments, and now that there's so many other enchantment options and builds you can have inside the game, just comparing to tiered gets kind of weird. But also it's a lot, I wouldn't say a lot easier, but it's fairly easier, just kind of like, oh, cool, I rolled a tier 12 legendary that I can kind of put some stuff onto, instead of like farming for some kind of legendary or divine UT that's a super rare drop. So getting like the optimal best ones is also something for consideration, that I don't know how rare it is to roll Thornswarm, that I've been farming Divine, Novice, untiered items, and all you have to do is just put one in and you get it. So we have Bramble Bow, and then I could just kind of click any of this and it will be legendary, because like it would only take one as well. So aside from the insufficient Forge Fire, you just need one legendary and the materials in the Forge Fire, and then you can get a legendary Bramble Bow because it doesn't have any set requirements. And then for my first Divine Bramble craft, I got Thornswarm. So as you can see, I like having a lot of these Divines for like the lower things, because maybe they have Awakened, maybe it gets buffed, maybe there's a fun build around it. So I did it with the Poison Fang Dagger, and then first Poison Fang Dagger, Venom Coating. However, I am over 200 rolls on the Crystal Serpent Staff that I've done dozens of crafts and then dozens of enchants, and I haven't gotten Crystalline Channel, the one I want. So I don't know if this is super lucky, if for some reason the Bramble Bow and the Poison Fang Dagger are just more common, even though that's not accurate, because if you go into the doc that the devs posted, they have the same enchantment weight. So I don't know what happened, what's wrong, and I really just want to make a Crystal Serpent build, and I want that to be a video, but unlucky, I guess. I don't know how easy or difficult it will be to replace this. I don't know if it's worth chasing compared to just, yeah, farm high level, like farm veteran and exalt dungeons until you get a legendary or divine tier 12, tier 13 weapon, and then that's just going to be great. Also, another problem with this build is I don't know how it feels compared to enchantments, that if we have armor piercing 170 rate of fire, this item is going to scale better with attack and dex enchantments than other tiered weapons. So with this much base stats and base power going into it, what happens if you just have flat dex and then like attack vitality trade-off on everything else and then on shoot bonuses? If you spend the dozens and dozens of hours getting perfect divine gear, does this actually just become one of the best weapons in the entire game? That's another reason why I go off of vibes and farming, because yeah, if I can just like comfortably sit out in the deep sea abyss and then farm for like tier 9 and tier 10 divine gear, that seems pretty good to me. That the current chase right now is whatever build is the most comfortable and the most efficient for farming tier 5 rings and tier 10 armor, so I have the highest chance of getting a legendary gear set that can have all the cool stuff I'm looking for. And then that's also why I'm just showing various things. Like, yeah, you can farm Abyss pretty comfortably. I actually do not care about any of this. Ew, we got a UT that isn't even enchanted. Like, if it's not legendary rarity or higher, you just leave that in the bag. So yeah, the ability to clear out easy dungeons is really nice with this, and then if you're just kind of going for various farming throughout the world, this is also a really nice build, because Dead Church, this was in one of my other guides, where if you're trying to look for easy legendary loot, gear rebuilds, or just kind of get a stockpile of different things to test out, you just go out here and then you can mass AoE farm and get all kinds of really good stuff. So with this, yeah, the Bramble Bow does alright for that, but at the same time, Summoner kind of has the same effectiveness. That these enemies do still put out a lot of bullets and can be dangerous. Also, there's just like random armor piercing damage and stuff, so you can't just run melee into everything. But that's also why we have the Protective Matrix, so you can farm as aggressively as you want. You can just run around things, run into things, and then boom. Tons of loot all over the place. This just seems to be a pretty good weapon for farming. And the primary benefit really is the range, especially on Bard, that I can just kind of get inspired and then throw out good enough damage from a pretty long range and take out whatever I want. But also, it destroys things up close really quickly, so you can kind of rush with it, or you can at least kind of just clear out tons of enemies. So this is definitely where it beats a tiered bow for certain farming situations. And then, yeah, it feels nice and cozy. And if you don't have a protective matrix, then you just go for more defense and durability, and you shouldn't die. Also, it depends on the class and the gear that you have, because, oh, we can make up for a lot of stuff by just running a Quiver of Shadows on an archer. And since the archer is going to be more damage-oriented, even though this attack plus dex is lower than what we have on the Bard, we also have a lot more durability. So we have 900 hit points, we have much more defense if we're going like Aspirant, which means it's safer for us to play at a range where even a tier 9 bow is pretty effective, and since we're going to be focusing more on damage over dexterity to a degree, we can actually like pump the damage of the bow and take out a lot of things, and then we get crazy AoE from our Quiver of Shadows. So if I put on the Bramble Bow for something like an archer that has the Quiver of Shadows, it speeds it up a little bit, but it mostly doesn't matter, like if your quiver shots are good. An untiered item for a different slot can just completely invalidate what you're going for because, yeah, you just spam Quiver of Shadows and that's going to be more effective than anything any build can do, and it effectively makes whatever bow you're using irrelevant unless you're using like a higher tier bow because, yeah, you can just get a tier 12 or a tier 13 super easy. So you just have naturally more damage and more effectiveness while you're letting your Quiver of Shadows carry. But also, once you get into higher defense enemies, then yeah, the Bramble Bow is just going to be better, and those calculations have probably already been done for like all the tiered weapons and stuff, and just hard for everyone to catch up with new enchants and new UTs and things like that, which is again why you kind of have to go off of the vibes. If you don't have super crazy stuff like the Quiver of Shadows or some other overpowered set bonuses to go off of, then yeah, this is actually just nice to have, where it's like, wow, look at that. You can just run up to something in a medium safe range and dissolve it, kind of like any class, and you can play, like you can adapt your playstyle, or at least be like slightly more comfortable, slightly lazier, and in a game where, oh yeah, if you die, like you just slip up for 0.2 seconds, you lose everything you've worked for. This is actually just a nice weapon to make up for that. And the nice thing about this bow is that it works with a lot of builds. You can go tankier, you can go more offensive if you're doing lower level farming, and that's just kind of the benefit. Do you need to bring it for Oryx 3? God no, it's way too rare for that. Don't. Just bring just a high tier bow, sit back, and then contribute. That's really all you have to do. But if you want to have autonomy and just kind of do whatever content you want, or if you're with friends in a small group and you're trying to have some kind of fun team comps and team builds, yeah, this is actually a pretty powerful bow that lets you get away with a lot of things, and depending on your comfort and risk tolerance, kind of creep up and just farm a lot of really good content and bosses that you need to do if you're not in a group. Oh, that changes up some of the farming ideas. We're like, yeah, I can just go into a solo Spectral Penitentiary. I have no intentions on clearing or beating it. Also, because I don't have a lot of experience with like super high end-game sweat farming and stuff, if you see this, it's like, oh yeah, that actually seems pretty solid for like minion Spectral Penitentiary farming if you're going for like the white bag upgrade. Then yeah, maybe this is good. Maybe this is viable. I can stay at a safe range. I can just put the swarm of thorns around. So yeah, there we go. That's the Awakened Bramble Bow. It's fun. I think it's good. It allows for a different kind of farming and a different kind of comfort. Maybe it's also just like the projectiles look pretty, so that's giving me some bias right there. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video showing off the Bramble Bow. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.